Prophet ﷺ. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, at this point, when he conveys it to other people, there are different ways about what you do with that and how you preserve it. So this book, called the Arba'in al-Nawawiyya, actually the real title of this collection is Al-Arba'un fi Mabani al-Islam wa Qawaid al-Ahkam. It's nicknamed the 40 Nawawi Hadiths. But what it's actually called is the 40, and it's not the 40, it's called the 40, regarding the foundations of Islam and the rules of, or the principles of religious rulings. So the 40 in the foundations of Islam and the principles of religious rulings. That's what's really called the longer title. Same with Sahih al-Bukhari. Everybody calls it Sahih al-Bukhari. It's actually a much longer title. It's a former title, but people forgot the name and they just call it Arba'in al-Nawawiyya. Actually, there's not 40 hadiths in this work. There's 42 hadiths, technically speaking. Okay? So we're going to see why it's 40 hadiths in just a bit, why they call it a 40. But they round it from 42 to 40 as a general thing. This work, Imam Nawawi heard 26 of these hadiths from the Shaykh of his Shaykh, Ibn Salah. Ibn Salah was one of the greatest hadith scholars of his time. Now, I want to situate what's going on here with Imam Nawawi. So today is like an introductory class, and at the end, last half, we will get to one hadith. But the reason I'm laying the foundation for what we're listening to is so you can appreciate how it got here, and that we can become a little bit closer to being like the people who brought this to us. Imam Nawawi, he died in the year 676. 676 after Hijrah. Okay? And basically, so we're talking how many years ago is that? 676. It's roughly 800 years ago. Okay? Just a little bit less than 800 years ago. Okay? He lived in Damascus. We're going to talk more about his life. His teacher's teacher was Ibn Salah, and he got to hear 26 of these hadiths. And then he added on. Now, Ibn Salah, he had 26 of the hadiths, and he called them al-hadith al-kulliyya. He called these hadiths the universal hadiths. And he called them that because he believed that if you pick all of the hadiths of Islam, if you had to hand pick, and there are thousands and thousands of hadiths. Like Imam Bukhari himself, it's arguable 5,000, 7,000 hadiths, and that's only one of the 6 books of hadith. And even after the 6 books, there's many books of hadith. There are thousands of hadith. So if you had to, out of like 20,000, 30,000 hadiths, 40,000, 50,000, if I told you to just pick like 26, 25, it would be not easy. Because every single one of them, every single hadith is loaded with divine revelation. Now, oftentimes we think that wahi, what do you mean wahi? What do we mean? Revelation. What is revelation mean? The word of Allah. So, are hadith the word of Allah? No, it's not the words of Allah. The speech of Allah is eternal. The Quran is the speech of Allah. The speech of Allah is eternal. Had no beginning. In other words, okay, it's Allah's own speech. But the words of the Prophet, are they revelation? Who thinks that the words of the Prophet are revelation? Put up your hand. Who thinks that the words of the Prophet are not revelation? Put up your hand. Okay? So that's fine. It's good, just take a risk. You're not gonna get marked on this. It's just a thinking exercise. Because I know why some said that it's not. Because you say it's not Quran, so you don't mix up the Quran. In fact, the Prophet in the beginning of his life, he said, and even towards the end of his life, he said, do not record my hadith. I don't want them to be mixed up with Quran. Don't record my hadith. I just want the Quran to settle. And it was only later on, after he passed away, and the next generation, the Sahaba, they started getting worried that we haven't been memorizing what the Prophet said, and the Quran now is set. There's no one who's going to add. There was a time once the Quran was it was always set. But I mean, the people knew what Quran was. They had memorized it. This is why they said, okay, write the hadith so people don't forget them. Because they were memorizing hundreds of thousands in their minds. And that's when they started to write and record hadith. Imam Malik, and then Imam Bukhari, and Imam Muslim, and so on and so forth. But what they say is that there are 2 types of wahi, 2 types of revelation. The first is called al-wahi al-matlu, the recited revelation. That is Quran. We recite it in our prayer. And then there's another one called Al-Wahi Al-Ghayr Al-Matlub, the non-recited revelation. And that is Allah inspiring His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to speak something, to act in a certain way, to approve something. Those are all aspects of the Sunnah. So the Sunnah is a type of revelation. Why? Because Allah reveals to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ doesn't make up the laws of Islam. He doesn't just say things and I think this is what it is. When he speaks from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's not the eternal speech of Allah. It's filtered through His heart, through His words. So you see the difference? Both are a type of revelation. And then Imam Nawawi will mention that he's stuck mostly to Sahih Hadiths in this. Actually, all of them are authentic Hadiths in this work. Most of them are from Bukhari and Muslim. But when he says something is authentic, he includes Sahih and Hasan Hadith as well. Okay, he includes Sahih and Hasan Hadith. So in this course, we're going to try to balance a little bit of technical points with a little bit of focus on the meanings and the implementation. Now, Imam Nawawi mentions, actually, we're going to go through his introduction briefly. We'll mention that. So each of these hadiths is an axial hadith on which a principle of Islam is based. Let's get into our slides here. So why the 40 hadith? Actually, let's do this. If you go to the book that everyone should have run, we will go to page 19, right? Now, page 19 is the introduction of Imam Nawawi himself. Actually, let me see, before we get there. Yeah. So we talked about what the purpose of the prophetic teaching are. And just before we read his introduction, I want to mention a few things about Imam Nawawi himself. So when we speak about Imam Nawawi, people don't know this. He actually passed away very young. Anybody know how old he was when he passed away? He was at 44, 45 in Islamic years. So he was very, very young when he passed away comparatively to other scholars. But what he achieved in his lifetime was nothing short of a miracle. It was absolutely amazing. He was born in a village called Nawa, which is on the outskirts of Damascus, the south of Damascus. This is during the Mamluk period. Okay, so around this would be what? If he died in 676, this would be 631. Okay, yeah, Hijri. And so he comes about 600 years after the Prophet ﷺ. And as a boy, his father was was a pious man, but they were not connected to knowledge. He wasn't like a sheikh. His father was a pious man, and they were from a village. Villages typically did not tend to have a lot of knowledge options, So he grew up learning Quran. And, how kids go to Sunday school or they go to Maktab, he learned Quran in the same way. But from the beginning, he was different than other children. He didn't want to play with other kids. He just wanted to keep reciting Quran over and over and over. And so there was actually, people noted that once he was seen crying because the boys were trying to pull him into their games, and he refused to play. He just wanted to recite Quran all the time. And so people kind of had this idea that this is going to be someone very special, because even from that age, he did not have the typical outlook of other boys his age. It is also said that his father was a very pious man, and his father took him when he was 18 years old. His father took him to Damascus. Damascus was and still is one of the centers of Islam. It was the capital of the caliphate at one point in time. Okay, so Muawiyah radiallahu anhu made Damascus the center of his caliphate. So it was considered one of the major centers of knowledge. And when he took him to Damascus, he took him into the circle of the ulama at 18 years of age to start his studies. Now, typically speaking, most of the scholars of Islam started studying Islam much earlier. But what this tells you is that there's no necessary age that you have to start studying Islam. Okay? So there are some people who have been in madrasa since they're 9 years old, 10 years old, and they just grew up always memorizing. But he started his journey as an adult. And within a short span in his life, he became one of the greatest scholars of Islam. The Imam Nawawi was brought, and he was first brought into one of the circles of the ulama. He stayed there for some time, until they were very impressed with him. And soon he started to have many different teachers. And it is said that he had and his teachers were the big scholars of his time because they were impressed with him. And what they really liked was that he was so focused on his studies. He was so intent on seeking knowledge. He didn't socialize with people. So they brought him very close. And generally speaking, if you have a teacher or you follow a scholar, in the beginning they kind of keep you at arm's length. But when you prove that you are someone who really wants to take from them, then they tend to kind of like take you under their wing and give you even more. So this is why students of knowledge like to do that with their shuyukh. And then Imam Nawawi, as he started to learn more and more, it is said that at one time, in one day, he would take up to 12 classes. Can you imagine taking 12 courses a day? Okay, how many would you take even in like school? You might take 6 classes a day, maybe 8, I don't even know if 8. 12 classes, and they're at high levels of Islam in all different subjects. And they asked him, they said, if you take 12 classes a day, how do you review? Like, when do you find time to review? He says, as I'm walking the streets from one class to another, because he would go from one masjid to another masjid to the house of the scholar, he says, I review my notes as I'm walking between classes. So he was somebody who had that all in his mind. And subhanAllah, as he started to grow older, he was offered a job in Hadith or Ashrafiyah. And in the beginning, he took a salary for his teaching, but after that, he began to give his salary away. He didn't accept his salary. And he became known as a very ascetic scholar, meaning he was a zahid. Zahid means someone who doesn't take much from this world. So he actually refused to eat things that other people ate, and he would ask his father to come from the village, from the outskirts, like once every few weeks, and just bring dried rusk called kak, like literally dried rusk, and he would eat that. He would drink once a day before Fajr. Once. And he would go the entire day without food or drink, and after Isha he would eat dinner. Okay? He would sleep. He says there were 2 years of time in which his side did not even touch the ground. Like he said, that he would be studying and writing so much that when he fell asleep, he would just fall asleep on his book itself. And then he would wake up and continue writing. So this is like a superhuman. Don't try this at home, okay, please? Don't anybody try this. Because what you'll realize is if Allah hasn't built you like that, you're gonna crash. And some students of knowledge go and they crash. But Allah gave him this amazing ability. Now, why would you do this? For most people, we would say that that's not a responsible way of living, to be very honest. In fact, eat healthy, get your rest. But for him and his intention with Allah, it is, we don't know. Maybe Allah put it in his heart that he's going to live for a certain amount of time. But he knew he had to study as much as he could and produce as much as he could. And the amazing thing about Imam Nawawi is that, he lived in his room, basically, around his books. His books were borrowed. His books weren't even his own. He borrowed his book in every single field of Islam. Okay, so this is 40 hadith. He's got a larger collection called Riyadh al-Salihin, okay, which is like a larger collection of hadith. He's got Kitab al-Adhkar, about du'as. He's got, and they say, in Syria they have a saying, Bi'a ad-dar washtari al-Adhkar. Sell your house and then go buy the book, the Adhkar. Because his book of the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ is such a beautiful collection. There's no science that he didn't touch except he mastered it. So Al-Majmu' al-Fiqh, 30 volumes. Okay? He has a book on At-Tibyan fi Ulum al-Quran. He has a book in every single field you can think of. And when he wrote the book that would be like the gold standard of that field. So when we studied different subjects, we would come across Imam Nawawi's books in many different subjects. But at heart, I would say he was a Shafi'i jurist, but he was very strong in hadith as well. So he has commentaries on Imam Muslim, on Sahih Muslim, commentaries on Sahih Bukhari, and so on. Towards the end of his life, as he started getting, by the way, the other thing is the rulers were also scared of him. So he had, even though, I can imagine somebody who sleeps and eats very little, he must have been probably not big in frame. He's always in his madrasa, but when it came to enjoining good and forbidding evil, he was fearless. So once the sultan of his time was taxing people too much, overtaxation, and he wrote a letter to Sultan Baybars to basically admonish him, stop oppressing people, lower your taxes, this and that. And they said to him that if you write this letter, I mean, come on, it's the same way today, unfortunately, with the dictators. You might disappear. You might get exiled. He said he wasn't afraid, only for the sake of Allah. So he wrote that letter, and the ulama, the sultans, because of how much love and respect the scholars had in the eyes of the people, they would have to back down. So there was a time when the ulama were a counterweight to the rulers and leaders. Imam Nawawi, he continued like this until he was 45, and one day he got sick. He went back to his village, he gave away his books, and he went back to the village and he passed away. Just like that. It's as though he knew he was going to pass away because he gave back his books that he borrowed and he went back to his village. His grave is a place that is still visited. SubhanAllah, a number of years ago with the ISIS fitna, an extremist tried to blow up his grave, actually, because, I don't know, he didn't like the people who were visiting it. But there were many people, alhamdulillah, over the years, a lot of scholars would visit the grave of Imam Nawawi. And I remember once, I never had a chance to go and visit when I was in Jordan. Over the 12 years I wanted to go, but somebody brought me back a little bit of a little piece of cloth that covered his grave. And as a reminder of Imam Nawawi, I stuck that cloth on my desk throughout my studies. All the years of my studies, I stuck that with tape on my desk. When I was leaving, I took that off and I put it inside his book to remember the sacrifices that he made, subhanAllah. So, bismillah. Let's get now to read the introduction of Imam Nawawi's book, and then we'll get to a hadith. This is page number 19. And it goes, Muqaddamat al-Imam Al-Nawawi. So this is Imam Nawawi's own introduction to his book. And I want you to remember, as we're reading this, that he's writing this 800 years ago. If you want to know if Allah has accepted your work, like you do something, you want to know, did Allah accept this from me? You can pretty much bet, if people are reading your book 800 years from now and making dua for you, and you're benefiting them, there must be some acceptance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this. Right? The fact that this 40 hadith collection, he's not the first person who wrote in 40 hadith. There are many scholars who wrote 40 hadith collections, long before him. But this is the one that the ummah has accepted. And they take it and they teach it. And they pass it on and they memorize it. Right? So this is actually a sign. Us sitting here today to hear his book, the fact that it's called after his last name is a sign of Allah's love for him and Allah knows best, and a sign of acceptance. So we'll begin. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Qayyum as-samawati wal-ardeen, Mudabbir al-khalaiqi ajma'een, Ba'ith al-rusuli salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, ila al-mukallifin li hidayatihim wa bayani shara'i ad-din, ad-dalail al-qat'iyya wa wadihat al-barahin. So he says, praise be to Allah, Lord of all the worlds, and eternal guardian of the heavens and the earth, disposer of all created beings and dispatcher, the one who sent the messengers, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all, who were sent to those to be entrusted to guide and reveal religious laws with positive signs and clear-cut proofs. Then he says, وَأَحْمَدُهُ عَلَى جَمِيعِ نِعَمِهِ, and I praise Allah for all of the blessings that he's given. وَأَسْأَلَ الْمَزِيدَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ وَكَرَمِهِ, and I ask Allah for increase in his bounty and his generosity. وَأَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, and if you don't understand the Arabic, don't worry about it, that's why I'm doing a facing translation. Okay? And I bear witness that there is no other God except Allah wahda, alone. لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ الْوَاحِدُ الْقَهَّارُ الْكَرِيمُ الْغَفَّارُ. And this often happens in introductions to classical texts. They begin with praising Allah, and then they say the Shahada. They say the Shahada in their introduction. I bear witness that there is no God except Allah alone, who has no partner. He is the one, the overpowering, the generous, and the most forgiving. وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ سَيِّدِنَا مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَحَبِيبُهُ وَخَلِيلُهُ وَأَفْضَلُ الْمَخْلُوقِينَ الْمُكَرَّمِ بِالْقُرْآنِ الْعَزِيزِ الْمُعْجَزَ الْمُسْتَمِرَّ عَلَى تَعَقُبِ السِّنِينَ. And I bear witness that our Master Muhammad is his servant and final and messenger, and his beloved, and his friend. And he is the best of all creation. And he is the one who is honored with the mighty Qur'an. That Qur'an that is a lasting, continuous miracle, even after the passing of years. And what did he send the Prophet with? بِالسُّنَنِ الْمُسْتَمِيرَةِ, لِلْمُسْتَرْشِدِينَ. He sent the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with his example that gives light to those who seek guidance. Sayyidina Muhammad, our Master Muhammad. So a lot of times as well, you'll notice that classically people didn't take the Prophet's name directly. They used to say Sayyidina Muhammad or Nabiyuna Muhammad. Nowadays, I find it very jarring. In fact, most people who study traditionally, when they hear preachers calling the Prophet, like just Muhammad said this, Muhammad said that, let me just give an example. Like you wouldn't say that about your parents. You wouldn't say that to your parents, right? So even in the time of the Prophet, they would call him Rasulullah, Nabiullah. You don't just call him by his name, unless you're identifying him, or there's a reason to say that. But often they would say Sayyidina Muhammad, okay, our leader or our master, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Makhsus bi Jawami al-Kalim. That Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Muhammad, who is chosen, specified, bi Jawami al-Kalim, with the miraculous, concise speech. What is Jawami al-Kalim? Anybody know what Jawami al-Kalim is? Jawami al-Kalim, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he says, I have been favored over all the other prophets by 6 things. And the first thing he said was, I have been given the ability to have concise speech. The Prophet ﷺ, the miracle was, all of us, if we have to say something, we talk a lot. We say many, many words, many, many words. The Prophet ﷺ could say one statement that you could even count the words on your hand, but it would take commentaries just to explain it. If you look at his hadith, they are so encompassing of wisdom and guidance. So because he had to give these few words, subhanAllah, this is one of the things that he was saying, Jawami al-Kalim, the ability to combine lots of meanings into brief speech. Was Samahat ad-Din, and he was sent with a tolerant religion. Islam was called Al-Hanifiyat al-Samha. It is the tolerant, easygoing monotheism. Now, this is a strange thing. In our time now, sometimes people make deen so difficult. If you were to tell them Islam is actually the easy religion, the tolerant religion, they'd be like, what are you talking about? It's like, you just call it that, but it's not easy. You just call it that, but where's the tolerance? This is because when we get disconnected from the personality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Islam begins to seem difficult. Islam begins to seem intolerant. This is why we are studying the Hadith, my brothers and sisters. You know what my Hadith teacher, Sahih Muslim, his name was Shaykh Shiraz. You know what he told me? He said in our class one day, and the final year in madrasa is just devoted to hearing Hadith all day long. And it's one of the best experiences of my life, to hear Hadith for 1 year straight. And he said, students, my beloved students, we are really only hearing the hadiths to learn how to become human once again. To learn how to become human once again. Because after 8 years, 10 years, 12 years of studying fiqh, of studying grammar, of studying, usul, tafsir, you learn all these rules and intricacies, and you become a little bit like a religious robot. Many of us, when we become religious, we become strict. It's the first thing we do. We become strict. We become difficult on other people. We become difficult on ourselves. And when we become difficult on ourselves, we become angry. And anybody who bothers us, we don't even realize why we're frustrated. But we don't realize that we make religion difficult. And so there's this state of agitation that a lot of religious people go into. You have to wonder, how can religious people become extremists? How can you become extreme with religion? But it's so common. Not in Islam, every religion. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was brought to bring us back to that middle, to bring us back to that balance. And so subhanAllah, that's why my teacher said, when you directly hear the words of the Prophet ﷺ, it brings you back to a level of humanity, brings you back to understanding how he was. And then, Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi wa ala sayyid nabiyyin wal mursaleen wa ali kulli wa sayyid salihin. May the peace of Allah and the blessings be upon him and on all the prophets and those who were sent, and his family, every single family. Al is family, but it's broader than that. It's not Al. It's not just his family. Al is his people. And that's all of us, alhamdulillah. And on all of the righteous people. Amma ba'd. And as for that which follows, فَقَدْ رُوِينَا عَنْ عَلِي بْنِ أَبِي طَالِبٍ وعبد الله بن مسعود ومعاذ بن جبل وأبي الدرداء وابن عمر وابن عباس وأنس بن مالك, this is on page 21, وأبي هريرة وأبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله تعالى عنه من طرق كثيرات بروايات متنوعة. So then he says, as for what follows, now in classical texts, they often praise Allah and then they say amma ba'd, as for what follows. So now he's saying, now I'm going to get into my words. I'm going to tell you what I want to do. And he says, he starts with the hadith. And he says, it has been conveyed to us, narrated to us from, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Abu Darda, Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Anas ibn Malik, Abu Hurairah, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. How many Sahaba is that? 9 Sahaba. Okay, so 9 companions of the Prophet ﷺ in many different chains of narration, in different types of narrations, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ called, and Rasulullah ﷺ called, من حفظ على أمتي 40 حديثا من أمر دينها بعثه الله يوم القيامة في زمرة الفقهاء والعلماء. That the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever preserves for my ummah, for my community, 40 hadiths in the matter of their religion, Allah will send that person forward, bring that person forward, resurrect them on the day of judgment in the group of the fuqaha, the scholars and the ulama, the jurists and the scholars. This is where the idea of 40 hadith comes from, this hadith. Whoever, let me see, can I have this written down here? I'm not going in exact order of this. There we go. Whoever of my ummah preserves 40 hadiths, right? And there's different narrations from the sunnah, meaning from my teachings, till they convey it to others. Okay, this is another version. That whoever of my ummah preserves 40 hadiths from the sunnah till they convey it to others, I will certainly be an intercessor or a witness for them on the day of judgment. So then he continues and he says, and in the narration of Abu Darda, and he says this, I will be on the day of judgment an intercessor and a witness for that person. Meaning, if for some reason you are condemned because of the sins you've done, the Prophet will intercede for you to tell. And in the narration of Ibn Mas'ud, it will be told to that person, قِيلَ لَهُ أُدْخُلْ مِنْ أَيِّ أَبْوَابِ الْجَنَّةِ شِئْتَ. Huge rewards. And in the riwayah of Ibn Umar, Kutiba fi Zumrat al-Ulama, he will be recorded, or she will be recorded in the group of the scholars, and will be wahushira fi Zumrat al-Shuhada, and gathered together in the group of the martyrs, the Shuhada. واتفق الحفاظ على أنه حديث ضعيف وإن كثرت طرقه. And the scholars, the memorizers of hadith, have agreed that this hadith is weak. This hadith is weak, even if it has many chains of narration. Now let me ask you something. Are you allowed to use a weak hadith in Islam? Can you use a weak hadith in Islam?
For virtues.
For?
For virtues.
For virtues. Yes. So this is often something that people misunderstand, because there's different opinions on this. But generally speaking, what the ulama say of the hadith scholars in the past was that you can use a weak hadith because they're grading of hadith. They have to figure out which is the most authentic saying of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's why they would have a weak hadith, a good Hasan hadith, a Sahih, rigorously authenticated hadith. Hasan and Sahih are considered authentic, meaning we're very, very sure the Prophet ﷺ said this. Very, very, very sure he said this. A weak hadith is a hadith where we say there's a good chance that he said this, but there's a chance that it may have been a narrator who said this. Maybe he didn't say this. But weak does not mean it's fabricated. You're not saying it's an invented hadith. Fabricated, you can never use it. You can never even narrate a fabricated hadith. So anytime you get a WhatsApp forward, and you get some hadith that sounds like it's like talking about, hadiths that are talking about modern political times by naming people or something, that's fabrications, usually. And you're not even allowed to forward those hadiths to other people or say them, unless to point out this is fabricated. But a weak hadith is something, usually where in the chain of narrators, maybe one of the narrators had a poor memory, so he got mixed up with the wording, or he used to forget, or something like this happened. So they say that we don't know 100%, but there's a good chance. Now, with the weak hadith, you can only use it for virtues. Targhib wa tarhib, fadail. Okay, it means that if the hadith is saying, for example, to do a good deed, you can use a weak hadith for that. If it's saying to stay away from a certain sin, you can use a weak hadith for that. But if it's saying a new type of prayer, no, then you cannot. If it's giving you a ruling in Sharia, no. If it's telling you part of your Aqidah, no. Only Sahih Hasan Hadiths can be used for that. Weak Hadiths though, so he's saying the idea of collecting 40 Hadiths comes from a weak Hadith, but he's still acting on it. Okay? And then he said, and many of the ulama, may Allah be pleased with them, have actually compiled 40 Hadiths. So many people have done this that you can't even count. And the first person that I know who compiled 40 Hadith is Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Abdullah ibn Mubarak was one of the early generations of Islam. So he was around the first 200 years of Islam. Okay? So by the time Imam Al-Nawawi comes, already people have been compiling 40 Hadith collections for 400 years. And then Thumma ibn Aslam al-Tusi, the great scholar ibn Aslam al-Tusi, then Hassan ibn Sufyan al-Nasa'i, and Abu Bakr al-Ajuri. And then he goes on to name Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Asfahani, wa Daraqutni, wa al-Hakim, wa Abu Nu'aym, wa Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, wa Abu Sa'id al-Malini, wa Abu Uthman al-Sabuni, wa Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Ansari, wa Abu Bakr al-Bayhaqi, wa khalaq la yuhsuna min al-mutaqaddimina wa al-mutakhirin. You don't have to memorize his names. He's just giving you the names of all the different early scholars. He says there's too many to count. And then he said, and I asked Allah, وَقَدْ إِسْتَخَرْتُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى فِي جَمِيعَ أَرْبَعِينَ حَدِيثٍ. And he said, I made istikhara. You know istikhara is the prayer? When you want to pick, like you want to do something, you want to do an action, but you're not sure if you should do it or not. You pray the 2 rakahs, and you make the dua of istikhara. It means to ask Allah for the best course of action. And he said, I prayed to Allah to show me the best course of action with regards to compiling a 40 hadith collection. He wanted to do it too. He said, I'm doing it to follow the example of those great imams and those preservers of Islam. So he's actually being very humble. He's a great scholar, but he's saying, I'm just doing my own 40 hadith collection because I want to be like those scholars who did it before me. Okay? And then he says, and the ulama have agreed that you are allowed to act on a weak hadith when it comes to the virtues of good deeds. And so with this, I'm still not relying on this hadith alone. He says, I'm still not relying on this hadith alone. Rather, I am trying to act on the Prophet ﷺ when he said in a sahih hadith, لِيُبَلِّغَ الشَّاهِدُ مِنْكُمُ الْغَائِبُ. Let those who are present convey to those who are not present. And the Prophet ﷺ when he said, نَظَرَ اللَّهُ إِمْرَأً سَمِعَ مَقَالَتِي فَوَعَاهَا فَأَدَاهَا كَمَا سَمِعَهَا. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said in Tirmidhi, this is authentic, may Allah bless that man, in other words, also that man or woman, may Allah bless that man who hears my speech and then takes it in, absorbs it, holds it, and then gives it out the way he heard it. Meaning, the person hears the hadith, they memorize it, then they go to someone else and they say it back just the way they heard it. So don't change anything. Don't try to tinker with the hadith. The way you heard it is the way you give it out. Now, this is just a side note for the, if you want to know. Most of the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ are not actually his literal exact words. Something, I might memorize the exact word, or I may say something like it. Most hadiths are actually something like it, but the meaning is preserved. But there are very few hadiths where the literal word of the Prophet ﷺ is preserved. Anybody know what any of those hadiths? مَنْ كَذِبَ عَلَيْهِ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ فِي النَّارِ. So then you're meaning, whoever lies on me purposely, let him take his seat in hellfire. That's one of the hadiths that actually word for word, we know exactly every word, every if, and the is from the Prophet ﷺ. That's a warning for people who invent hadith. Then there were from the ulama who compiled many different 40 hadith collections in the principles of religion, or in the details of religion. Some of them compiled the 40 hadiths of jihad. Some of them compiled the 40 hadiths of zuhud, meaning abstaining from dunya. Others in etiquettes, others in giving khutbahs. And he says all of those are really good things to compile 40 hadiths. So 40 hadiths on the virtues of Ramadan. 40 hadiths on being kind to your wife or kind to your husband. For example, like people compiled a lot of 40 hadiths. But he said, he says, and that is 40 hadiths that contain the teachings of all of those different types of things, where every single hadith is going to be a great principle of Islam, of the actual foundations of Islam. So he's going to build the principles of Islam in these hadiths. And they're going to summarize all of Islam in these hadiths. And he said, I'm going to bring hadiths where the ulama said that Islam revolves around this hadith. So there's some hadiths that are so important that ulama said half of Islam is on this hadith. A third of Islam contains this hadith. Those are the hadiths I'm going to bring. And, or like, they represent half of Islam or a third of Islam, so on. And he says, and I've also stuck in this 40 hadiths that they should be authentic. So most of them are from Bukhari and Muslim. And I will cut out the chain of narration. So he's not going to tell you the entire chain of narration, because it's going to get long. Why? To make it easier to memorize. Otherwise, we would be sitting saying, an Umar, an Alqama, an Fulan, from this person, heard it from this person, heard it from this person, heard it from this person, then say the hadith. If we do that, it'll be long for you. So he's saying, I cut out all the narrators, just give you the words of the hadith itself. And then he says, so that there's more benefit, inshallah ta'ala. And then I will follow up with some of my own notes. He says, and it is fitting for every single person who wants the next life, the hereafter, to know these hadiths. It is fitting for anyone who wants to be with Allah in Jannah to know these hadiths because of the important affairs that are contained within these hadiths and how they alert you and inform you about all types of good worship. And this will be clear to anyone who really reflects on these hadiths. You'll agree with me. And my reliance is on Allah, and I give my affair to Him, and I lean on Him. I rely fully on Him, because for Him is all praise and all blessings, and through Him alone is divinely gifted ability and protection from error. So that is the first, that is the introduction, alhamdulillah. And so when we talk about hafidha, preserving hadith, what do we mean by preserving hadith? Yeah, because that hifz, right? As most people think it's memorizing. Actually, the most basic form. So how can you guys preserve these hadiths? Yeah, we can memorize them. But not everybody memorizes them. Not even every student of knowledge memorizes them. If you memorize it, great. But the main thing is to transfer it to another person. So if you know it, you can't share a hadith with another person. Doesn't mean you teach it. But you can always say, hey, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said X, Y, Z. That actions are according to their intentions. Even if a piece of it. So that is actually a form of preserving it, by conveying it to other people. That's the minimum. Memorization is just a tool to convey. Like, why do we memorize? In order to convey to the next generation. But there's also another thing, and this is a deeper look. So what you all are doing is the next level up, which is what? To preserve the meanings of these hadiths. Not just memorize the words, but preserve the meanings and understand what it means. The Prophet ﷺ, he said to his Sahaba, let those who are here take my hadiths and convey them to those who are not here. Why? Because how often is it that the one who hears the hadith secondhand understands it better than the one who heard it the first time? So, in other words, I might be conveying this hadith to you, but Allah has put more understanding for this in your heart than in mine. Right? This is why preserving the meaning of the hadith, what you all are doing, is a very sacred act of Islam. Wallahi, this is chosen by Allah. So that's the second one. And the third way, which is how the scholars of the heart preserve hadith. How is that? How do they memorize and preserve hadith? Act on it. Right? This is the whole point of it. Guys, this is this whole thing. is not going to be useful to us in the ultimate sense unless we act on these hadiths. So our first intention should be, oh Allah, whatever I hear of these hadiths, let me act on it. Every single night, if we give a hadith here, let it change our hearts. Let it rewire our being. Even if we've heard it a million times, let's find a new way to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these hadiths. Let's look into our lives and see where can we correct ourselves. Otherwise, I will tell you, brothers and sisters, you can seek knowledge for 20 years, and it's all just details on paper, and details forgotten after that, meaning you don't benefit from it. But the way that you benefit from the hadith is when you take it home and you think about it. That's why everybody has the copy now. You think about it, you practice it, you act on it, and you beg Allah, oh Allah, let me practice this hadith. And even if you can't practice the hadith because maybe it's a hadith about Hajj and it's not time for Hajj, you say, oh Allah, give me the ability to one day practice on this hadith. And therefore, through your intention, you get the reward as though you actually practice the hadith, right? So, alhamdulillah, that's how when we talk about preserving. So let's see how much time we have left. Okay, we could get into the next hadith. This is where I want to ask you all, okay, because we're a group. I don't want to go on too late, because I know it's Thursday night. It's a blessed night of Jummah, there's the Jummah. Beautiful night to say salawat, by the way. And every time we mention the words in the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, everybody under your breath, if you can, say sallallahu alaihi wasallam, alayhi salam, peace be upon him. Okay, if you can. Why? Because it's really good on Friday to say salawat. And one of the beauties of hearing hadiths is that you hear a lot of salawat and say a lot of them. So we'll try to go for an hour. Okay? So would you guys like to actually get into the first hadith, or should we keep this as the introduction? Because I don't want to go beyond the ability of, there are people with kids here, there are people with work, there are people who are tired. Shall we rest, or shall we start one hadith? Okay? We'll take a break then, right? Inshallah. And so what we'll do from next week, we will actually start getting into the hadith. This was just a way to prepare ourselves, to warm ourselves up. And every time I taught this, I do the same thing. So alhamdulillah, we have a good introduction now. Are there any questions before we take a little break for, I think, chai and something else? Yes?
Is it too late to have more people come for next week? Inshallah, if we want to tell more of our friends to come?
No, they can come. They can come, but they should register. Okay, they should register, and especially since they're lucky, because we didn't actually start narrating the hadith. So if they missed the introduction, they can get it on YouTube, but they'll actually catch the first hadith, right? Alhamdulillah. And those who are able to attend every class and listen to all the hadiths from me, then they will get the sanad after, inshallah, as well. And we'll probably go for about 13 weeks, 12 to 13 weeks, okay? We'll take a break at Ramadan, and we will begin a week after Eid. All right? Inshallah. Any other questions or anything about what's happened today? No?
General question is,
yeah.
Are these lessons on YouTube also?
Yeah, they'll be on YouTube. Yeah, but the ones who get the actual ijazah are the ones who actually hear it from present, right? But I do encourage, if you miss it, just come back. And if you ever miss a class, just grab me somewhere and say, can you read the hadith to me? And I'll open the book and I'll read it to you. And everybody, I'll do that. As long as you attempt to come every class. Okay, I can't do that if you skip 10 classes or something like that. Okay, I know once in a while things come up, but it takes a bit of dedication. Okay, so if there are no other questions, Jazakallah khairan, may Allah bless you all, may Allah give us barakah, may Allah... The first hadith is the hadith of intentions. So before we get into that, let's make our intention that we're doing this for Allah's sake. We're doing this to ask Allah to change our lives, the lives of our families, the lives of our communities, and to convey from the Prophet ﷺ what he was sent to convey in our own lives and to all those around us and for future generations. Wa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Muhammad alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And there are refreshments outside. No, we're done for today. We'll come back next week.
I just had a question. It wasn't relevant to the or what you were discussing.
Yeah.
But you know that one hadith about it's kind of weird about 70 virgins. Is that one considered a weak tattoo.
Okay, let me just.
I know that's kind of a big question. Sorry.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. Let me try to. How am I gonna end this live?
Oh, you're still.
Guys, I'm a bit of a dinosaur, so I'm just trying to figure out how to end this live. Thank you guys for joining us online. Assalamu alaikum.
This was recorded or not?
Yeah, it's recorded.
So somebody want to listen to it, they could?
They can listen to it. Yeah.
Like tomorrow.
They
So,
could. They could.
Alhamdulillah, thank you.
No problem. Assalamu alaikum.
I want to introduce myself. I'm Samaya.
Oh, Soya, how are you?
How are you?
Finally, mashallah.
I wanted me to get on the non-personal there.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Send my salams to him.
I ask about YouTube because I'm out of town some weeks.
Yes, yes.
I work in Nevada most of the time. But
In Nevada?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
I got an office there, so most of the time I'll
Mashallah.
be. But I always try to come back for weekends.
Your name again, brother?
Johan.
Johan. Johan. We met before, right?
Yeah, we did. Like Sheikh Shahid did a class, but I think you go in much more detail than because Sheikh
It's more
Shahid
academic,
he did a class also on the 40.
Yeah, it's a more academic approach.
Yeah.
So it's for, yes.
Very good. Alhamdulillah.
I came late. I did not know like this stuff, but this stuff.
That's okay. Oh my gosh. It's okay. Anybody have tissue? I took off. Okay. Reminder, don't put open.
Is it okay? You're still working?
Well, I hope so.
Inshallah.
If I start hearing some funny sounds, I'll let you know. All right. Maybe next week I'll try to do that. Because they were donated. Oh, I should mention they were donated. No, that's okay. You have different copies? Oh, you have that one? Bismillah. If you want to take it, Bismillah. Yeah, no, she's offering it. Give her the reward of taking it. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah.
I literally like.
You sure you don't need to
Can I show you the video?
Yeah, sure.
So I went to like during Thanksgiving. No, I